We've all been there, in the middle of a job, everything going smoothly, until boom, you're missing a part. United Refrigeration is your one-stop shop for all your refrigeration needs. Use your computer or smartphone to go to www.uri.com at any time of day or night to check stock on your favorite brands, such as Copeland, Sporlan, Carlisle compressors, Danfoss, Emerson CPC boards and sensors, Carrel, Hussmann parts, and K2Therm. United Refrigeration Inc. is home to these brands and many more. Looking for information on refrigerant conversions or refrigerant banking? Quick access links on the homepage can get you to the information you need. All approved accounts are able to see live to-the-minute inventory and pricing. Product not in stock at your local branch? No problem. Use the Nearby Stock feature to find a local branch that does have what you need. Are you looking for a branch address, phone number, or after-hours number? That's all available as well. Just click on the branch locator and search for your local branch. Have a model number and looking for a replacement part? www.uri.com/ARP has a vast list of quick pick replacement parts. Just search for the model number of the equipment you're working on and click the Replacement Parts tab. If you don't have an account, click the Register button and we'll have you online in no time. With more than 400 locations in North America, each United Refrigeration branch is fully stocked for immediate pickup. Our branch employees have in-depth technical knowledge, so we can help you get what you need when you need it. Visit your local store or www.uri.com/ARP today. United Refrigeration Inc. has all your solutions down cold.
John, how can you always have the right TV for the right application without carrying hundreds of valves on your truck?
You can carry the hundreds of valves on a trailer behind your truck.
That's too funny. That would work, but how are you going to do that? Maybe there's an easier way.
You can use Sporlan's interchangeable cartridge style Type Q and Type BQ TEVs. Type Q is a conventional design and Type BQ is a balanced port TEV.
Well, come on, I need easy. How easy is it?
Easy as 1, 2, 3.
And it serves thousands of unique applications. So what's the process? How do I put this together?
First, you select the thermostatic element assembly. Then you select the body that you need. Then you select the right size cartridge for the application to get the proper capacity TEV for your application. And then I guess it should also be said you want to actually assemble those into a single valve.
That'd probably be a good idea.
Indeed.
These easy to select and assemble valves mean you're always carrying the right valve for the right job then. If folks want to learn more, what do they do?
You can go to sporlan.com and find more information on the Type Q and BQ thermostatic expansion valves.
I guess that's Jim and John for Sporlan signing off.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Advanced Refrigeration Podcast. You're here with your host, Brett Wetzel and Kevin Compass. And tonight we have a special guest, Joe Summers from Copeland. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Brett. How about yourself?
Good. How about you, Kev? How you doing this week? Where are you at? You at home?
I'm exhausted. I'm at home.
Why are
Just
you exhausted?
chaos and fires and just chaos.
You remember asking for that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, and then quotes and office type work.
See, I'm in the opposite this week. I'm actually working out in the field and actually getting dirty and being utterly exhausted because I forgot how to do work, I think.
We're starting 85 island case installs across stores, and we're trying to do multiple a day. And yeah, I have never had such a bad time putting cases together.
Just like remodeling or what?
Yeah, we won't know we're adding circuits. Some are getting replacements, most are getting added, so it's
Mhm.
new sets. So I'm over here helping do case drains. It's like a 20-foot case takes 4 hours to do case drains.
Was everything packed underneath there and real tight?
Yeah, I'm sliced up like unbelief from doing them today. Like I'm cutting case rails, like just massing everything, just thinking about just rage quitting.
Where your hands look like you've been playing rock, paper, scissors with Edward Scissorhands.
Well, I want these engineers that design these cases to explain to somebody how they're supposed to get all these drain pieces on or drain tees on here and tie this whole thing together without being like with 4 people.
You know the answer to that. It looks good on paper, man.
Yeah. Like, it's just the most you just look at it, you're like, "This is the dumbest thing ever."
So, Joe, how about your week? How are you doing?
My week has been going great. What I'm doing a lot of what we're going to talk about. I've been working on a lot of programs surrounding A2L releases at Copeland. I spent the better part of the day talking specifically about new fittings for A2Ls. But so I got to split a little bit. I was a little bit at home, a little bit at the office today. But it's been a great week, just hanging out with the kids and day works like normal.
I'm going to ask you about the fittings in a second here because now I'm curious of what the heck you're talking about. But how long you been with Copeland?
I've been with Copeland now. It's 2014, so 9 going on 10 years. I started out as we called it the product planner of transport for refrigeration systems, and I kind of worked my way up to through. Actually, my background is actually more in electronics than in the mechanics of HVACR systems, but you pick it up, right? And so I got into controls after that, variable frequency drives, and kind of worked my way up to where now I'm the product manager for scroll and drives. But overarching, we're implementing A2Ls across a huge number of platforms right now, and I'm leading that initiative for Copeland right now out of our Sydney, Ohio office.
First, I want to know about what fittings are you talking about?
One of the new things with the A2Ls is the mechanical fittings. So anything that's not brazed actually has to go through at the OEM level. It has to meet a certain test, and that test is called ISO 14903. What it is that mechanical fitting, as it's put together, has to go through basically what is a 6-week fatigue test to say it's not going to leak beyond X amount. And so all of our mechanical fittings, because obviously people in the field don't want to mess with that, right? So we're going through the certification of all of our fittings to make it so that the customer and our OEMs just have to buy the prepared fitting combination. But I can't just use any old fitting anymore unless it's brazed. Brazed gets an exemption.
Okay.
So a lot of people are going to start pushing more brazed fittings, but where the mechanical stuff matters, right? Especially in refrigeration, where serviceability matters quite a bit more, right? Those mechanical fittings are still going to be around, but they've got to go through some extra tests in order to do that in the new low GWP A2L world.
All right. Let's start off by what is an A2L because I've heard people talk and they were like, "Oh yeah, CO2 is an A2L." I'm like, "No, it's not." So, just for people just so they understand like what you're actually talking about, what refrigerants do you refer to as an A2L?
A2Ls, the one that people probably identify the most is because if you bought a new car since about 2014, it's in your car air conditioner is R1234YF. But A2L is just a classification for the level of flammability of the refrigerant. It's probably an extreme example, but the way I like to describe it to people, just give a visual, because I feel like most people have done this. It's an A2L is like how kerosene would burn. It burns slow. It doesn't burn very fast, and it's not explosive when it does burn. And it takes a lot to get it to ignite. You can't like a small static spark for your fingers, not going to get it to ignite. Whereas the non-flammable refrigerants today, they're called A1 category. But the extreme of that is like R290 is considered an A3 refrigerant. And A3, obviously, it's more explosive in nature. It's something like when you look at most of the A2Ls that we're talking about, R290 is 8 times more explosive than an A2L refrigerant would be. So there's a big difference between them in terms of safety, but also in terms of performance and things that you consider. But when you look at the low global warming potential refrigerants that are being considered for these upcoming regs, when you get down to those low GWP refrigerants, all those non-flammable refrigerants become difficult to use anymore. All the alternative options, other than like a CO2 or like an R471A, are basically all flammable. There's some exceptions to that, like ammonia, but I don't know that we're going to see ammonia used in a refrigeration system in the supermarket anytime soon, just because it's toxic. And that would be a B2L, actually. or it's toxic and it's like mildly flammable. But that's more of an industrial gas. But when I say A2L, I'm referring to a mildly flammable refrigerant.
So not exactly propane, but just a little bit more flammable than or less flammable than propane.
Yeah, a lot less flammable than propane. Like it's not. They're not even on the same level when it comes to flammability of it. It's I think it's like an A2L will burn at like 10 centimeters a second, and A2L is like or A3s are like instant. It's
Wow.
it's that nice slow burn versus an explosive effect.
So what refrigerants now are you going to be putting out there or that are maybe already out there for medium and low temp applications?
So the ones we're doing three that we're focusing in on for all of our products and our main product lines. It's R454A, R454C, and R455A.
Okay.
And so those three are the main ones, and there's a reason behind each one that we can dive into here. You have a question? I don't mean to.
No.
So when you look at with the EPA regulations and how they're rolling out, they really have refrigeration split up into two major categories: remote systems and self-contained system. Like remote systems, I'm talking about like a condensing unit that's installed like on a walk-in where it's outside, and self-contained, it all comes from the manufacturer in one big piece, and you call it that way. So the regulations split it up into basically it says 200 pounds of charge or less for a remote system that you can get away with 300 GWP options, global warming potential. And that opens up a couple of new options that are pretty much equivalent to R404A is what I'm
Mhm.
going to compare it to. But a lot of the people with remote systems, they're looking at R454A because you actually get more compressor capacity out of it compared to 404A. I actually improve your compressor efficiency a little bit. And just like at a medium temp, you're actually improving your compressor efficiency by about 6% or so. And it has a GWP of about 238. So it's a good option. It actually buys you some performance, and it's got similar glide to the 448A, which is widespread use today.
Do you have to do anything with the nozzle? If it's existing system has R404A and then you put R454 in there, do you have to do anything with the capacity of the nozzle? Because you said it's fairly comparable, right?
It's fairly comparable, but A2Ls in general, the regulations, you can't retrofit it. There's other things in the system, and there's actually some reliability challenges. So as we implement our A2L implementations, I'll call it high HFO content refrigerants is what A2Ls are. High HFO content means what percentage of it 1, 2, 3, 4 YF is, basically. And refrigerants that have high HFO content, the systems are more susceptible to high oil miscibility versus an existing system today. And the problem's even especially bad at low ambient temperatures. So there's actually reliability improvements that are being made to all the products in order to ensure equal or greater reliability to the products of today. There's also some other things like I mentioned, the certified fittings already, but there's also things like changes to the electronics that have to happen, where there's things like sealed relays that need to be used in a lot of electronics. Things like variable frequency drives have to have certain certifications in order to use them, or certain enclosure ratings in order to use them. So you can't just use any old VFD anymore. You have to actually use one that's rated for flammable refrigerants. There's things like the fusible plug that you would have on a receiver has to be vented out now. It can't just vent out into the space. There's a few other changes as well, but it's definitely not a retrofittable solution, I guess is where I would go.
It's a virgin system only then.
Virgin system only for
Okay.
8 walls as of today. That could change in the future. They could make, because like we're us sitting here talking, I mean, there could be a path to retrofittability, but that doesn't exist today.
Okay.
We won't see it in the short term. But when going back to why we selected those three refrigerants. So when you're talking about the self-contained systems, they have a limit of 150 GWP.
Mhm.
So then your options get a little slimmer, and there's some issues with some of them. So like R454C, for example, it's a great refrigerant, but you actually lose at medium temp about 8% compressor capacity. So you need more compressor displacement, more mass flow in order to achieve the same capacity that you would with R404A. To some folks, that's not that big of a deal. As well, it has similar glide to R448A today. So it's pretty easy for people to implement in the system. And there's another option too, R455A. R455A, you get the same compressor capacity that you get essentially with 404A. But the challenge with that one is it has a lot of evaporator glide. So it's 22 degrees of evaporator glide. So it's quite a bit. If you design your system for it, you can overcome that and it can be great. It can be a really good refrigerant to use, but it requires major system redesign in most cases. So most OEMs are steering away from it.
Sounds like the evaporator would have to be not it would have to have a higher TD, so it wouldn't attract so much ice on there because you're telling me it's a 22-degree glide. That's a lot of freaking difference. You could be running 30 degrees, right? Saturated on vapor. You could be running 10 degrees saturated on your liquid side, is what you're
Oh
telling
yeah,
me. Oh,
exactly.
a lot.
So
That's a lot.
if you design your system around it, you can make it work and you don't lose that compressor capacity, that
Yeah.
system capacity that you would lose. But there's some other advantages too. Like I mentioned, the flammability of these refrigerants. So one of the advantages of R455A is it only has a 1% air to gas range where it's actually flammable. You guys ever watch Mythbusters? I was a Mythbusters fan. When it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the way I like to describe this is that they had an episode where they turned on the natural gas stove in the house and left the candle burning, right, to see when that gas mixture would eventually get to the point that it would blow up the house. And it's the same thing here. It's just with the house example, if you were to fill that house up completely with natural gas, that flame wouldn't light at all. There's no oxygen, right?
Yeah.
So there's too much gas in the mix. So 455A only has a 1% air to gas mixture where it's actually flammable. So some people will actually like it for the safety piece of it because it has that very specific mixture in order to be flammable at all.
Does that mean that if there's no oxygen if it's in the system, if there's no non-condensables in there, technically it wouldn't be flammable while internal in the system. Is that correct?
That's right. It's not going to burn.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you have to have leaks. That's a lot of the tests surrounding A2L system approvals are about worst case in the event of a leak. It's like you mentioned, when it's in the system, it's obviously, it can't, no oxygen, it's not going to be flammable. There's some of the surface temperatures are more heavily monitored in the new standards and things like that. But again, until it gets out and there's enough oxygen to allow it to burn, it's just as safe as an existing system until that unique condition exists. So most people are looking when they have to go to that 150 GWP level, self-contained. Most folks are looking at R454C, R290. There's some folks looking at this R455A and doing this optimized system design around it. But so R290 right above, you get up to about 3 horsepower is about what you're going to get in terms of capacity at the most. With the charge limits associated with R290, you're not going to get more than that.
Okay.
Great choice, 3 horsepower and below. And then you get above that, and that's where everybody's looking, 454C and R454, 55A. And then there's remote systems where you can get 300 GWP in. Most folks are looking at R454A, which is, it's actually not, the trade-offs aren't that bad, and it actually has some advantages.
What's the current max charge on all three of those refrigerants?
Oh, geez. There's a calculation associated with it. I want to say that the only one I'm going to be able to reference off RIP is the R454C, which I think it's 167 pounds.
Okay.
But there's a rating of the refrigerant. It's called LFL, the lower flammability limit. You take that, and there's an actual calculation that is in the standard where you can calculate out how much refrigerant you can actually use in the charge.
Does this mean we're back to the day where we're looking for leaks with a lighter? Can we do that?
It would work, but I don't think I would do that. But there are special leak detectors and things like that that are coming out to detect this. Actually, at Emerson, we have a new line of leak detection devices that are A2L compliant, and we also have it for CO2 and other things as well. But yeah, leak detection is getting used in a lot of these systems. There's other things surrounding controls, isolation valves, electronic leak detection that's being implemented depending on the size of the system and where it's being used at.
What about charging? Do you guys have any plans on making like a little like charging stand? Because like most of the stuff that's out there is like janky and like hard to use, especially for the smaller stuff when we're buying like propane or A2Ls, like in like small containers. Like it seems like there's nothing good out there to charge these little systems up.
Yeah, so A2Ls, the containers themselves are really limited by the transport piece. So they're trying to say there's hazmat protocols for A2L transport. So it's the current transport limitations of that is 25 pounds in a container. So you'll definitely be able to get bigger than you can get in an RT90 container. But obviously, if you have a bunch of 25-pound containers, it'll be a little bit easier than probably what you're dealing with R290 today.
So just regular standard refrigeration cylinder,
Right.
just 2L, whatever A2L regulations it needs to be.
But no 100 pounders anymore.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to use a 100-pounder because you would have to, there's transport protocols surrounding it. They limit it at 25 pounds,
Plus,
basically.
plus if the system max weight is, if you can only put 200 pounds in, that's 8 cylinders, not that much.
Yeah, it's definitely better than the little tiny containers of R290 that you're probably hauling around today.
Says grade.
But a lot of those fire codes and things they're being established now. So that's one of the things about A2Ls is they're not technically a lot of the ones like most of the ones that I just mentioned that we're approving, you're technically not allowed to use them yet today in the existing system. So there's the EPA regulations and there's building codes and there's actually the SNAP listing. So the EPA actually listing out the refrigerants that you're allowed to use. We're expecting that here anytime that the new SNAP listing is going to come out that includes these refrigerants that I mentioned. And so that's when everything really sets off for these A2L refrigerants when that SNAP listing comes out. Because a lot of the national building codes and state building codes that reference it that's what really sets it in motion that allows everything to happen.
So who out there has equipment then that runs A2Ls currently?
Nobody. I mean, in Europe, they're running quite a few. And you'll see it in car air conditioning systems. There's also stationary, larger air conditioning systems that will use A2Ls today, but you really can't use it in refrigeration yet as of today.
Okay.
But it's up and coming. We think a lot of people are going to start releasing it. I'm working with a lot of major OEMs today, especially when we're talking about your remote condensing unit folks that are all targeting because all these regulations they go into effect. The current date is January 1st of 2025. So everybody's targeting being ready at the beginning of 2024 to be because you'll be able to use them, the A2L refrigerants by then. And the phase down from the AIM Act also occurs. So the HFC, R404A like refrigerants are all going to be, the production of them gets cut down to 60% of what it was. So it's the price of the refrigerants is probably going to go way up at that point. They're already pretty bad, but they're definitely going to get worse at the beginning of 2024 when that phase down hits. And at that point, that's probably going to drive a lot of people to start thinking, okay, I don't want to deal with this cost and this regulation is coming up next year anyway. I might as well start looking towards an A2L system. We've got a few customers starting to field trial and things like that this year to be ready for that date.
Okay. So are you guys implementing new valves? Because you said with the new regulations, you're having to make new valves. They have to be different seals and stuff like that. So you're still in the process of getting stuff approved?
Yeah, we're going through basically every combination that we have that's a threaded or flange fitting, a mechanical fitting has to go through this 6-week test to prove that mechanical joint when torqued to our specification that has to be done in the field, obviously, will stay sealed and it will only leak by X amount over the course of time. So it's like an accelerated test to make it leak. We charge it up, put it under a vacuum, charge it up, put it under a vacuum, charge it up, put it under a vacuum. That's basically what the test is. But it takes a while and you got to hook up every single one of them and prove that it's there. In some cases, there's design changes in order to make it so that it passes that test. But overarching, it's really that certification that's important in proving out that mechanical joint and the torque specification for that joint is doing what it's intended to do to avoid leaking.
So you're gonna have your torque spec and Ugga Dugga too, so the guys know how many Ugga Duggas to do on each flange.
Yeah, exactly. You might need a
Nice.
torque wrench now.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're about to need all these torque, at least an adjustable style torque wrench and a regular standard one.
You should have a torque wrench.
What?
I have a torque wrench.
Yes, you do. Don't.
I have a torque wrench. I said you should have one.
Yeah.
You just use
Oh.
you just put a crow's foot wrench on there and you're good to go.
Doesn't that throw off the torque?
I'm sure that an adjustable torque wrench is not exactly very acceptable for torquing things. If you want to get down to the nitty gritty,
I actually just heard this. And I don't even know if this is true. I didn't even get a chance to look it up, but someone also said that if you have dry thread versus wet thread, if you're using some kind of sealant, it actually changes the torque spec. I don't know if that's bullshit or not.
well, it changes the torque dynamic of the bolt.
Uh huh.
So it'll torque out harder with oil or thread locker in there.
So if you set it for 70 foot-pounds, it might go up to 80.
Or it's gonna torque early.
Oh, gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
Than it would dry. It actually matters. You can go down a real rabbit hole with that.
I heard it. And I was like, no, that guy's full of
I
shit.
mean,
There's no way.
not that it really matters that much. It's not like we're building motors here or car stuff. Like I'm using a cheap torque wrench. It's a flare fitting. 90% of guys you're lucky if they even get a torque wrench or if you can get it in anywhere.
Sure.
I think it's after 15 or 20 years in, it's either your wrist and your elbow usually become your torque wrenches. So I think my wrist snaps that are like 10 foot-pounds. My elbows were about 20, I think.
Today's episode is sponsored by the RefraShield RDP Series differential pressure monitors from Westermeyer Industries, now available for transcritical CO2 systems in addition to other common pressures and refrigerants. When the filter element of your coalescing oil separator is contaminated, it can hurt your system's performance and efficiency. But how do you know when it's time to replace that filter? Wait too long to replace, and you could end up with a nasty filter blowout. But replacing too often can be a waste of time and money. The answer is installing a differential pressure monitor. The RDP Series differential pressure monitors, including the new transcritical CO2 model, are available now from Westermeyer Industries. To find out more information, email sales@westermeyerin.com. That's WESTERMEYERIN.com.
So we're gonna have to get torque wrenches. Wonderful. So what else? What else about this testing? You said 6 weeks, 6 weeks worth of fatigue testing. So pressurized vacuum for 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's
Temperature,
essentially
temperature
cycles
change
through
too?
it. Oh, I'm sorry, say it again.
Temperature change too?
Yeah, the temperature's definitely changing in the joint, even just for the pressure change. But yeah, so it's validating that our torque spec, a minimum torque spec, is correct and that it doesn't leak when it goes out. Your other option is to switch to brazed. So a lot of folks are taking that path as well, where they're just switching everything to brazed fittings rather than having mechanical fittings anymore, because you don't have to do this fatigue test down that path.
Does that mean there's gonna be no more strainers on expansion valves now?
No, I think you'll still have strainers on valves.
Just I didn't know like how that affected what type of seal that was and if that fit the test or whatever.
So in some cases, so like the Schrader valve on our compressor, we're even having to do it for that Schrader valve and cap that we ship the compressor with. So that joint there has to be certified in order to say it won't leak between the cap and the joint. And whoever hooks up to that Schrader valve, they would then have the other. This is at the OEM level. In the aftermarket, you guys are going to do what you need to do in the field. I think everybody knows that, but at an OEM level, if they're putting their system to connect to that, then they have to certify that joint good to go in order to get their system UL certified.
Way too much government intervention.
Yeah. There's a lot to it. There's just, it's a lot of changes, but a lot of it's, I think, for the betterment of the system. Think about how many times have you heard about a Schrader valve leaking, for example, right? It's always the first.
Never. Never. That's
Got
a
a
unicorn.
Usually it's the guy that lied in their paperwork.
Now in an A2L system, he's not going to be able to use that excuse as much anymore. Now it's certified, went through a fatigue pulse test.
What?
It's going to be a much longer stretch to blame that Schrader core.
Stupid Schrader core and ATLs.
But things like that. So even like our onboard electronics, things are changing with those. You have to switch out the onboard relays and contactors with sealed designs. So I'm sure you've seen like a motor contactor, right? It sparks when it closes. So there's steps you have to take for that. And all of our contactors are being updated to new designs in order to achieve that certification. What else about these?
Motor enclosure, like if it has start components, the motor enclosure has to be different, doesn't it?
Yeah, so that's one way you can do it. You can do it through an enclosure test and you make it the worst case around it. The other way is to pass it at the component level for everything that's inside the box. And that's the approach that we took just out of an abundance of caution, just because, if a guy's got a cover off or something like that, and he's working on it and it starts and the leak just happens to be there, we didn't want to risk anything like that. So we took the decision. We actually took all the starting components themselves and made them sealed. So even if you have the terminal box open, you're not going to have a problem.
Oh,
But there's a bunch of different ways that you can go about it with electronics. But the others are the main ones. It's switching out the contactors. So that's something to consider too, especially in a service scenario. When you're working on an A2L system, you're not going to be able to just take an old school contactor and throw it in that system anymore. It's going to have to be a design that is fitted for A2L systems specifically.
wow. So it's not just the components that are in the refrigeration system, but it's all the electronics, all the contactors, everything that's associated with that unit. It's almost like when you're working somewhere and all their motors are X proof, they're X rated, where everything, the motor, the enclosures are rated for explosion proof areas. I used to work at a flour place and a wheat place. And when you're working inside the facility, you couldn't weld. So you had to take what you were working on, take it into the welding station, weld it there, and then bring it and make everything else mechanical fitting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite as extreme as some of like the ATAX and the explosion proof stuff like you're talking about, but it's definitely got elements of that. And it's all surrounding safe practice. Obviously, A2L refrigerants, they're not like explosive like you would get with the propane or like gas or something like that. It's still, most of the things are just good general practice, like purging the system with nitrogen and things like that you should follow with A2Ls. It's not quite the extreme of, you can braise the system. You just got to make sure that you're not braising it with the gas sitting there in it.
So wait, so you can't pump, are you not allowed to pump down the system like you would a typical refrigerant then? And then cut it and then rely on the ball valve that's there to hold back the pressure? You physically have to purge it with nitrogen every single time?
Never, you can purge it back. When you cut it out, you're going to want to purge out just the section that you have with nitrogen. You're not just going to want to go at it because you could potentially, that refrigerant that's there, you could potentially ignite. So it's a safety thing. But we're talking how much refrigerant's really there when you're doing that, right? There's not going to be that much that comes out. You blow it away with nitrogen, stick your leak detector up real quick, make sure it's gone, and go to it.
And you guys have a bunch of white papers, and I see stuff come out all the time from Copeland about best practices for all the A2L stuff, right?
Oh yeah. If you Google we call it our E360 resources. We actually just put out, it's about 6 pages. It details out a lot of things that I'm talking about here, from the changes to electronics to how to actually calculate how much charge you're allowed to use, safety practices for servicing, all in a quick summary, 6, 7 page document. It's a great resource there. But there's also deeper dives into each one of those topics if you really want to get into it. Videos. I've been on video more in the past 6 months than I've been on video in my entire life, to be honest with you. I was talking all about A2Ls and the different things that we have out there. So I think there's probably at least a dozen videos going over from everything from what is an A2L to what exactly is glide, for example. So it goes from the very ground level all the way to calculating out and service practices.
So when do you think the first systems are going to be up and operational and running in the US?
In the US, I think the earliest person that I know of that's starting is starting this fall.
Really?
That's when you'll start to see them. I think you'll start to see them in really big numbers in spring of 2024.
More self-contains or like more like remote units?
I would say both. I mean, if you're talking volume from the line, remote systems are really where the mainstay of A2Ls are going to be. But even those self-contained systems, the larger self-contained systems is really where you're going to see A2Ls.
When you say larger, the three horsepower units? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. About anything larger than 3 horsepower
Okay.
where you can't stretch R290. Because the same listing, so like even R290, they'll increase the charge limit. What it's like 300 grams for a closed case, 500 grams for an open case of R290 coming up. So that's what I'm talking about when I say that 3 horsepower, 3.5 horsepower at most. But with the charge limits that you can use today, it's probably even less than that. You're talking a horse and a half, 2 horsepower most.
Is there any need for liquid injection or any kind of demand cooling on these compressors because of the pressures? Because I haven't even ever seen a PT chart, I don't think.
Some of them, depending on which one you pick, some of them do run a little bit hotter. Yeah, liquid injection, things like that are actually become more important than they have in the past.
Mm,
And having a good control scheme to make sure that you're keeping it cool.
yeah.
But yeah, they're pretty comparable. It is a larger concern than it has been in the past. The things like our demand cooling module, we're upgrading that for our A2L. So that type of stuff will all be available and ready for A2Ls by the time it gets out.
Yeah. Kev, do you have any more questions for him? Because like I'm out. Unless Joe, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think we pretty much hit on everything that I wanted to highlight. Yeah, I think A2Ls are fast and upcoming. We're proving it across all of our scroll compressors, our discus compressors, our condensing units, electronics, variable frequency drives. We will have a
So
full portfolio.
is it going to be all new compressors, or is it going to be existing compressors you guys are using and having to redesign?
It- they do have upgrades. Our requirement was obviously we live and die by the Copeland brand. So our requirement from the very beginning was equal or better reliability than when it was used with an A1 refrigerant. We did make upgrades basically across the board. So all of your Z model compressors for scroll, for example, will all be coming, they'll be Y models is what they're going to be. We are making them reverse compatible though. So you can use the A2L compressor, you'll be able to use in an A1 system as well. So, over time, you'll just see less of the Z model and the Y model will move in.
So does that mean there's no difference in the oils then?
We specifically developed it with no difference in the oil or POE.
Interesting. This whole thing coming out, I'm assuming you guys, since you guys are pushing more into the scrolls, are they going to start expanding the variable speed scrolls?
Yeah, actually, we have a entire portfolio of some refrigeration specific variable speed scroll compressors that are being released right now. We have everything from about 1 to 7.5 horsepower. They're approved for A2L use. They have a sight glass on the side for oil management, made in the USA, Lebanon, Missouri. And they're also going to be approved for R290. What's interesting about those products with R290 is they spin at double the speed. So you get double the mass flow. So my reference to 3.5 kind of horsepower with R290, I'm going at double the speed. Now I'm getting 6, 7 horsepower with R290. So it's a big differentiator for a variable speed product when it comes to stretching the limited charge. And it's the same thing with A2Ls. When you get up to that 167-pound limit or anything less than 200 pounds, I'm referencing R454C. If you're running at a faster speed and that compressor's smaller, less volume in the system, less charge in the system, those variable speed compressors are a great tool for that. And they'll be approved for A2Ls and R290 and they're being released right now. So
Have they expanded the operating limits for the variable speeds? I know before it was like a 45 hertz limit for the A1s for most of them Z series. Is that they lowered that so you can get the variable speed limit lower, or is it still like a 45% variable speed limit?
they run from about 1,000 RPM to 7,000 RPM. It's actually a 6-pole motor. So it's actually the frequency that it's running at is about 50 hertz to about 360 hertz.
Oh wow, so you
Um,
drive them a lot.
yeah. So if you think about it like a normal 2-pole motor that we have today, it's running from about 10 hertz to about 120 hertz is the range of it. But because it's got more, there's more pulls in the motor. You got to run it at a higher frequency to get it to those speeds, which that's not a big deal. It's a permanent magnet motor. But if you think about it as 1,000 to 7,000 RPM, we usually got a couple of models that go up to 7,200 RPM. It's definitely something that it's a great tool for maximizing charge when you have a limit because you're doubling that mass.
Yeah, I mean, because that was always a limitation with scrolls is how low you could take them. You could only go so low with it because the slinger down there was what was oiling it, or how they pulled the oil up. It was from what I was told.
Yeah, it's a mechanical part. It doesn't actually have a power to it, but we call it an active oil pump in the bottom in the sump of these. And it ensures that you get enough oil flow at low speed, but it also makes sure that you don't get too much oil flow at high speed.
That's interesting. I wonder if a lot of the smaller units like protocols and stuff, you're going to start seeing some more variable speed scrolls instead of digitals.
Yeah, I think there's definitely customers looking at it, especially when you talk about people trying to stretch RT90. So I can tell you it's only a matter of time until it comes out with the number of folks that are looking at something like that, especially with a lot of the DOE regs coming up. There's a whole new round coming up here in a couple of years that people are already starting to think about because they're already making all these transitions with the refrigerants. So they're already starting to think about what they need to do for efficiency and variable speed, and especially when we're talking about something that has the speed, right? So you're getting double the capacity basically in a compressor that's much smaller. So if you think about it as like we have I call it a 70 frame, the 7-inch diameter shell compressors that are fixed speed today. Our very small 5.3-inch diameter shell compressor is getting the capacity of that 70 frame shell now in variable speed because double that speed. So it also brings down that applied cost for material stance as well. So drive plus compressor is getting a lot closer to the cost of that fixed speed model that it ever has before. So it's a new look for that solution that people have been apprehensive to in the past.
That's nice. I noticed in that Copeland Mobile app now you guys are actually listing drive models for compressors too.
Yep.
Like for what you guys have for if it's a 4D, like they're actually listing.
They have they have a new lineup of drives, and we saw it at NASRC, and they said you can actually drop the program in via an app on your phone.
Yep. We can do it over Bluetooth. That's the EVM product. You can drop it in over your phone, fully A2L, A3 approved already. So you don't have to worry about it there. The work on that's already been done. The EVM goes all the way up to about 25 horsepower. And then we have an EVH product line, which is similar to the existing Everson drives that you see out there in design. It's got like a full screen and things like that. It goes all the way up and through the entire portfolio product. So there's an option. Pretty much any fixed speed compressor that you are able to run with variable speed now, we now have a variable frequency drive option available for it.
So if you're watching this video, Kevin's feed just cut out, and I just got a message that just said "cool." I don't this for how much this guy does EMS work. I don't know what his fucking problem is with computers and internet. He has more problems than my great grandmother. It's ridiculous.
Spends all his time working on refrigeration systems and not enough time.
No, the freaking computer is garbage.
I don't know what that was a new one. Like it just literally said internal power supply error and just shut off. I literally use this computer for dialing into Costco's in the podcast.
Did you buy that computer? I know you said you bought a good computer. Did you buy this on wish.com? Is that why it's always failing constantly?
I don't know. I don't use it for anything like besides this and like dialing into Costco's. I just can't win with any computer I touch.
We got you back at least though.
I'm on my cell phone now, so
I looked down for a second because my phone went off, and I just see this message from you, like, "Why are you messaging me?" And it just says "cool," and I'm like, "What the fuck?" And then I look up, and I'm like, "You're gone." I'm like, "Oh, computer broke."
now that I have decent internet, like the computer's fucked. It doesn't know what to do. Now that I have 80 megabytes a second internet for the most part, like it can't fucking handle it.
You're driving a play school vehicle on the Autobahn now.
Yeah.
Lovely. Hey, I thought of another question. Solenoids now. Are your original solenoids that you guys make approved? Does the solenoid have to be different because it has to be that different rating?
So all the brazed ones, you're good to go, but everything with a mechanical fitting is going through the ISO 14903 certification.
No, but the solenoid coil itself.
Well, the solenoid coil itself isn't changing,
Oh,
but the actual solenoid valve itself has to be certified. But yeah, the solenoid coil itself, we looked at those and it wasn't really a sparking component. So it wasn't necessary. So other things like that were in that same bucket were like crankcase heaters were something we considered. We even looked at things like the mounting components and things like that, just to be sure, because there's even some material compatibility stuff surrounding A2Ls, just to make sure, because there are certain materials that A2Ls may eat away more than others.
I
See, existing refrigerants, certain types of rubbers or plastics, for example, it'll eat it away versus normal refrigerant that may be compatible today. I don't know the specific substances offhand, but I know that we went through a full material compatibility regimen to make sure that wasn't going to be a problem.
of any of the stuff that's in any of the valves that you guys make.
Yeah. And all the shields that are inside things, the bearings, all the
Yeah.
stuff that may have something that could potentially have a problem. We got to protect the brand and we got to make sure that we maintain the Copeland brand quality of products. We don't want people to start having issues as they implement these new refrigerants. And there's new challenges that, as long as if both the manufacturers are taking those into account, they're a great solution to these upcoming regulations and the environmental issues that those regulations are targeted at solving. At the end of the day, our goal is to have a equal or better reliable, more reliable product than what we have with an A1 refrigerant. That shouldn't be any different as we transition to A2Ls.
Kev, you got anything?
No, I'm pretty wiped out.
All right, Joe. Listen, I appreciate you coming on, and man, I appreciate it because I learned some stuff tonight, so I
Yeah,
appreciate
definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, no problem at all. It was great. I really enjoyed being on and I really enjoy the show myself. Appreciate you guys going through the effort to put it together. It's a great show and I am honored to have been able to take part in it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Hey
Thanks,
guys,
man.
have a good night.
Me too.
Bye.